I'm excited for tonight's conversation. This topic of how to get to know yourself. This is really what kind of set me on my journey of coming to know who I was 4 years ago. And I think that in one sense, we're never done. We never get off the journey. We're never arriving at a point of truly being known, and then we're done. And what a blessing that is. What a blessing that we're constantly moving in a direction of coming to explore and coming to know the fullness of who we were created to be in the first place. And in this process of how do I get to know who I am? How do I get to know myself? There's an element of this, especially depending on how you were raised, that plays such a big part. You can look at it kind of generationally, where some folks who were born in, like my grandmother, she passed away and she was born, I think, in 1927. And, she never was asking those questions. There was just like a simplicity to life. And also when you were being raised in wartime, I think her dad was in World War II. Or maybe he was in World War I and World War II. Her husband was in World War II. So I guess if her husband was, her dad was probably too old to be in World War II. But regardless, there were wars, in a really real way, where it was like kind of mandatory in such a sense for folks to go to war. And it was an honor at the time too, where it was like men wanted to go and fight for their country. And so living in wartime just made a more hardened, brazen people. And so in one sense, there's a comfort, there's a comfiness to us even asking this question, or we can look at it through the lens of what a privilege to be able to get to this point of saying, well, I want to get to know myself. Who was I created to be? And there's a semblance of like a luxury to asking that question. And at the same time, I think that we've experienced a generation that is more lonely and more disconnected than ever before while they're asking this question. So it's very fascinating. It's a very, very fascinating kind of tug and pull of, okay, how much do we lean into this question of how do I get to know myself, which probably could very well be one of the most important questions we could ever ask, while also maintaining this recognition that life's not all about me. And so because of this dynamic, because there is so much nuance required for us to do this work well, it almost can be scary to start going down this path, because for me, growing up in a very Christian conservative environment, I was afraid of becoming this like egotistical, green, envious monster. Like that's kind of how it was positioned, where if you go inward in any sense, if you look at yourself or acknowledge yourself, you're going to end up becoming just really kind of that monster. And what I've thought about over the last couple of years is, as I have come to wake up, so to say, I like to think of that concept, because as I've come to know myself, I've also come to know so much of a deeper ability to connect with others. Because for so long as I'm staying, I like to think of it as a tip of an iceberg. So long as I'm staying up here, just in my head, like above the water in terms of the tip of the iceberg, and ignoring everything beneath the surface, man, I'm really ignoring a big part of life and what constitutes the human soul. And so therefore, I'm going to have a much harder time connecting with someone else to help them go beneath the iceberg, or even for me to go beneath their iceberg and get to know their heart or their soul or their past experience. Because if I'm staying up here for me, it's going to be a lot harder for me to actually have meaningful connection for somebody else who has a deep well or has a deep iceberg. The older I get, the more I just am experiencing and seeing so much more pain in the world. And even here in the chat, our knowing community, we're growing, and we're hearing more and more stories of just real heartache of what people have been through. And so we get to come alongside each other and encourage each other and love on each other and support each other in a really profound way. And at the same time, it's like, man, life is really hard. And so then the question is, well, what does it look like if I was to go beneath the iceberg? If I wasn't just going to stay up kind of cognitively, intellectually stimulated, but I was going to allow for the emotional part of me to be cultivated, what will I find? So on the Knowing Show, we talk about the human intelligence, which goes beyond the intellect. It goes into emotion. It goes into spiritual. It goes into our physical bodies. I'm working with one of my clients right now, and He's doing well. His business is booming, and he's in a lot of physical pain. And I'm just watching him, and he can't enjoy what the fruits of his labor. He can't enjoy what he's experiencing after spending so much of his life building something. He's built this legacy, and now he can't even enjoy it because his physical health is giving out. So us being able to honor and tend to our physical body, as well as our minds, as well as our emotions and our spirit, there's a whole treasure trove waiting to be uncovered. And in us asking this question, how do I get to know myself? How do I do the work? How do I actually pull forth all that is there for me to, it's like leveraging and mining gold, and we have that gold within us. I was just talking with somebody today, and we were talking about okay, what part of us, because everyone says well, there's this very new age type of thought, which is you are God and God is in you, and you are, but you are God at the end of the day. And I was talking to him, and I was like, and this might turn some people away, but I'm exploring, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. I really, really have experienced, and I'm sure I'll come to learn way more through experience. I've really experienced meeting and encountering God. And I also have come to also experience that he's made me in a very unique way. So if we all were just God, then we would all look like each other, sound like each other, speak like each other. But I really have found I get actually a divine revelation about who God is. And I'm my own unique person that he made. And he made me in his image. And he's in me. But also, and I am Christene Marie. And going here in the chat, you are Be King, and you are Firla, and Arma Vera. There's so much where it's you are made so unique, and God is in each one of us, and that's really the bonding agent between all of us. That's what brings that sense of unity and that ability to love on a universal area and in a universal way. Apathetic. I'm just going to go ahead and put you on timeout. I'm sorry. We just don't talk like that here on the show, but I'd love for you to hang out with us in the future. I love this. Man in the Hat says, isolation. A man who is alone will discover who he is. Could be good, could be bad. Depends on the man. Isn't that the truth? Y'all, isolation will reveal. It really is this concept of, and this lends to isolation, but this concept of you shall know a tree by its fruit. What is the fruit of you? If you want to get to know yourself, look in the mirror and look at the fruit of your life, the fruit of your relationships, the fruit of, we talked about this morning. So we do a morning show where it's very much so focused on kind of the spiritual cultivation of our spiritual intelligence and also cognitive intelligence too. So much of our brain is kind of the final stop. It's like the buck stop, and then how we think about the world so often is what we experience the world to be. So our mind is really, really important for us to master. But when it comes to this whole conversation this morning on the morning show where we do a daily lesson, we were talking about this concept that you and I are the light of the world. And we have this ability to bring a presence into every single room we encounter, that we experience. And so if we're going to be the light of the world, then it's actually behooves us and is our radical responsibility to know, well, am I actually living in accordance with this identity and walking in the power of that? And so much of us being able to, this morning, when we did that lesson, I am the light of the world, I took that lesson and I put it in my phone. And every half hour or so, it's gone off throughout the day and just reminded me, this is who I am. And I actually really needed that. I had this moment earlier today where it just 6 different things went wrong, and I was late leaving, and I was just I hate that I got impatient. I hate that I got frustrated. And then my alarm went off and it says, I am the light of the world. And I was see, I forgot. I forgot who I was. And so in this kind of tug and pull of, okay, well, who am I? Who was I created to be? Who's the unique Christene Marie? Who's that unique person that God made, and being co-heirs with God and with Christ. And I get this supernatural access in terms of living in relationship with God that is absolutely incredible. And I am someone uniquely made. And so, yes, I want to know who God is and who the the character and qualities of God so that I can see the world through his eyes. And I also want to get to know myself, because otherwise, what's the point of him making us if we're all just little mini gods walking around? He made you and me for a purpose. We matter. And the cultivation of ourselves is so, so, so important. I was speaking with another woman who grew up very similar to me, where it was ignore who you are, ignore the parts of you that, because lest you become prideful, or lest you become full of yourself, and lest you love yourself more than God. And so it was very fear-based. It was very fear-based to just kind of ignore who God made. And so because of this, she was like, I never even looked in my eyes. I had never looked literally in the mirror at my own eyes, and I didn't even know I had flecks of gold and green in my eyes. She's 59 years old. And I just thought that was the most beautiful thing, because this question, how do you get to know yourself? We never stop asking it, no matter our age, no matter our demographic, no matter where we live, our culture. It's really, really exciting that we actually get to ask this question. It's a privilege. It's an honor. It's God-given in so many ways to be asking this question. So with that, I'm going to jump over here in the chat. Wayne, I'm so glad to see you. Who am I? How do I get to know myself? I depend on God to guide me. And I want to talk through tonight. We're going to talk about some specific practices that have really, really helped me in my journey. And I'm excited to hear from you guys on what's helped you in your journey to get to know yourself, because this is why we're here. We're here to grow together and learn from each other. And I've just really, really benefited from learning from y'all. So I'm excited to learn tonight and share. And so I hope you all are too. Sunny Moon, hello. I'm here with you. Thank you for joining. 𝐤𝐚𝐤𝐸𝐷𝐞, hello. 𝐵𝐸𝐾. Y'all, I am going to start putting people on timeout if folks are talking inappropriately. Just so you guys know, I really, really want to protect the chat here. James Alva, hello. Good to see you. Wayne, oh man, I'm so glad you're here. J. Chris, thanks for joining. Music, Mike, good to see you. Andre, Thunder Valley. He says, let me guess, you went to college. You might be surprised. Dust, Yold Walnut, hello. Good to see you. Christopher Adams, hello. All right, he says, this is a $1 billion idea. I spent my life so far trying to make a life for myself, getting involved in the lives of others, etc., that bearing the question of who I am, it brings me to tears every time. Wow. Wow. Chip Broadhead, good evening. Thank you for joining. Love Socks, good evening from Hershey, Pennsylvania. I love Mr. Hershey. I just love him. Fear Lal, good to see you. B King, I'm in the process of building my brand. We'll need to talk branding this week. I think a lot of folks are. Maybe we'll do that in the next night or so. Arma, good to see you. Christopher Adams says, when I found your channel, I began to ask that to myself for the first real time in my life. Who am I? Wow. I love that. I love that. Abdul, good to see you. Isaiah, I'm so glad you're here. Joseph, hello. Brian, good to see you. J. Chris, I love that. Yes, isolation and solitude are both great if you don't overthink. It's interesting. I think that if you've never had isolation, I think that it's so important to do that. The very first time I was ever alone, I had just started my business and I went to Honduras with USAID and I taught coffee farmers how to brand their businesses. It was the very first time literally in my life. I grew up with 5 other siblings. I was constantly around people. I got married at 20. And so I was constantly around people and basically having stimulus like every moment of the day. And that was the first time I was spent 2 weeks. I had hardly any signal. And I was in the quiet of like the Honduras jungle. Like we were deep, deep in Honduras. And it was the first time that I really sat with thoughts. And I asked myself, I had just started learning about emotional intelligence. And I had done this personal, I guess it's like personality test, the Enneagram. I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard of it, but the Enneagram really kind of bases your personality off of your motivations, what motivates you as a human. And I was asking myself during that week, like, do I need to be needed? Do I find my value and my worth in relationships by whether they need me or not? And I really had to like be honest about that assessment and that question, because frankly, I don't know. Do I need to be needed? Is that where I derive my meaning and my sense and my value in relationship with other people? And so I think to your point, Wayne, it's like, don't get to the point where you're in isolation, in solitude, where all of it is about us. But it's that fine balance. That's the beauty of the conjunction and. It's one very, very opposing truth and another. So it's exist in isolation, be quiet, eliminate inputs, listen, do the processing work, and go out and serve, love people. Remember that life is so not about us. And so it's this balancing act. I think one of the hardest lessons in my life was learning juxtaposition. It's like my therapist was trying to help me understand, your husband can love you and leave you. And I was like, what? Like, I just did not understand that. And that like blew my childhood mind. Like, my childish mind was stuck in black and whites. But as we cultivate into adulthood and cultivate our minds, we learn to understand, and is probably one of the most important words in the English language and just human language, and allows for two opposing truths to coexist, for there to be the existence of light and truth. And there's still shadow, there's still darkness in that sense. And this whole concept of, you want to have your cake, he actually gave me this analogy, my therapist, and trying to help me understand, like, you want to be fit and trim and healthy, and you want to have your cake too. And so it's like you're kind of in a tug of war with yourself. So this question, how do I get to know myself? It's actually really important that we analyze both sides, both of what feels conflicting within us. We were talking about this the other day, the lover and the warrior. Both actually can coexist and should coexist within us. Being a full cultivated human doesn't mean that we have to pick one or another. It's not or. It's not black or white. It's not this or that. It's actually, I think that there's actually multiple layers and multiple parts of the human soul and the human spirit and the human consciousness, which is so cool. That's why I like thinking about this in terms of intelligence, intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, physical intelligence. So let's go ahead and talk through just some ways to get to know ourselves and each other. One of the best ways that I've gotten to know other people and also myself is asking this question of just, what do I value? What are the things that really, really make me angry? What are the things that I feel impassioned by and about? So some examples of those can be justice. It can be truth. It can also be a direct ramification of maybe even a wound in the past. Like, I existed in a relationship for 8.5 years where I felt like I didn't know it was real. So I really value truth. I really, really value knowing what is, even if it's painful, even if it's hard. So I would rather get to a point in relationship with somebody where we're just being so incredibly honest, but at least I know, than like having my head in the sand and then finding out 8.5 years later that it was all a lie, for example. And so now truth has become a real value for me. And another way to kind of figure that out is, something in the past that has happened that has really made an impression on us, what makes us angry? And then also just what is something that we feel really impassioned by. And impassioned doesn't mean that we're angry per se. It just means like, maybe we actually feel super alive. Maybe we actually feel like super like, this is it. This is what I was created for. And isn't that a concept to kind of realize, man, this is why I'm here. This is what I was made for. Mr. 𝐥𝐢𝐯𝐞, good to see you. What books have you read that a non-intelligent can get? Mr. 𝐥𝐢𝐯𝐞, my first book that I read that really made an impact on me was Brené Brown's Daring Greatly. I felt it was so, I don't think of myself as a super, super heady, intelligent person. Somebody made a comment. They're like, I bet you went to college. I didn't go to college. I actually did not go the traditional route. So much of my life has been through experience and self-taught and through application. I think that that's the fastest way to learn something, is actually doing it rather than sitting and reading about it. And so that for me has been such an incredible way of study, is by reading something, yes, but then actually go and embodying it and experiencing it myself. So Brene Brown's Daring Greatly was literally life-changing for me. So I would highly encourage that book. There's another one that I just love. I don't know. I think a lot of people, I don't know if, like, depending on where you're at, if you would enjoy this, but Letting Go by David Hawkins. I talk about that almost every show. That had probably the most profound impact on me. But it started with Brene Brown's Daring Greatly. I was delayed for a second. I think I still am. Okay. Am I back? I'm like totally delayed, I can tell. Okay, I think I'm back. I'm closing out some tabs because I think I can tell that I'm like a little slow. Wayne says, I agree, waste of time is worse than waste of money. DJ, hello. Your subjective truth or your objective truth? Good question. I really value both, but more so I meant subjective truth. Like, I want to know what the other person is, what's true in their experience, in their literally experiencing the world through their eyes. Like, I want to know what's true for them. So yes, subjective truth in that regard. Yeah, I think of objective truth, like moral truth, as like capital T truth. So really, I should actually change it to, it's not so much valuing truth, it's more so like valuing experience. Like, what is your experience? I want to know that. Oh, I love this. Christopher says, I like to think of what the Japanese samurai once said: it is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Oh, a man who's a stoic and masculine, yet also reserved and compassionate. I love that. Women do not develop egos. They are 100% ID until they have a child, and they become 100% super ego. Oh man, Darlie, I think that's above my pay grade. I feel like I don't understand that, but I don't have kids yet, so I guess I don't have a super ego. But it sounds actually like that's something that is good to have. I think what you're talking about is more Eastern ego. Ima, good to see you. The topic for tonight is, we're talking about how to get to know yourself. DJ, have you started reading Screwtape's letter yet? You mentioned it. I bought it on my audiobook. I actually just started this weekend. I started reading A Case for Christ. I was talking to one of my dearest friends today, and they didn't like that book, so we'll see. But I was chatting, I think Kate Buck last week, she brought it up, and I just felt compelled to read it this weekend. But I've got Screwtape letters in the back of my mind, and I'll probably read that next. Puchni, good to see you. I mentioned you earlier today. I don't think you were on, but I think we're going to do an online retreat at the end of the month. So you inspired me. Puchni says, yeah, I found that the body scan meditation, there are a myriad of emotions going at the same time, and they are all valid and worth acknowledging. Daryl Saul, good to see you. James Bennett, hello. I'm glad you're here. Michael Miller. No, I've never seen that. Jocelyn, hello. Okay, I am going to go back. Yeah, you said I was freezing. Okay, so one, what are your values? How do we get to know ourselves? Knowing our values is so incredibly important. And 3 ways that we can really come to know our values is, what are those core moments in our lives that have solidified experiences that have really solidified into establishing a desired, I guess you could say, outcome in a different way. So for me, knowing what other people are experiencing and having that form of communication. And then also what makes you angry, like literally what pisses you off. And then also what makes you excited, what makes you feel alive and passionate. Next, one way that I really got to know myself When I turned 30, I wrote my eulogy. So that's a tip on how old I am for everyone who always asks how old I am. When I turned 30, I wrote my eulogy. And that was it was such a mirror moment, I'll say. I felt like I was looking in the mirror, because what it did was that it showed me this is who I say I want to be, and this is how far away I am from it. This is where I need to change in terms of, am I on the right trajectory? Am I on the right path to becoming this person, to being the person that I say I want to be? Am I even on the right path to begin with? I can tell that I'm freezing. Sorry about this. I'm like not looking, but I can tell in the little like side chat that I'm freezing. Okay, here we go. Y'all, write your eulogy if you're up for it. If it's not, and it's not meant to be sad. It's not meant to be, it's not meant to be something that brings you down. Actually, it's exciting. For me, it was exciting. It's like, oh, this is who I want to be. This is my target. This is where I'm going. This is who God made me to be. This is why I'm here, you know? And so Maxie the Maniac, like, why are you here? Why did God create you? Jim, you know, why do you exist? Why are you here in this world? J. Chris, DJ, you know, really asking that question of what is the purpose of my life? You know, I've got a question for us from this morning. The lesson this morning was, I am the light of the world. And my challenge for every single one of us was, by the end of the day, where have we been a light in some way? And I actually I'd love to know, like, where did any of you feel like you were like, yeah, I actually really changed an environment or changed a room or changed the atmosphere because of my presence? Y'all, we should be doing that on a daily basis, if not multiple times a day. That is how potent you and I and our presence can be, is that we get to bring light and bring love to the people that we're around. I'm just noticing a couple folks. I'm just going to put you all in timeout, since it doesn't seem like you're being super serious. So I'm just going to put you on timeout, but I'm glad you're here if you want to stick around and listen. Y'all, this conversation is so important. If we're willing to ask this question of, what does it mean? What does it look like for me at the end of my life to have lived a life well, to have a life that I'm proud of? What does that look like? What does it look like in terms of family? What does it look like in terms of maybe education? What does it look like in terms of service? What does it look like in terms of faith and spirituality? What does it look like in terms of partnership? You know, and writing this out is really, really helpful, because it's like at the end of my life. So that could be 40 years from now, 60 years from now, hopefully a long time from now. But even if it's, you know, maybe I've got 20 years. Let's say I've got 20 solid, strong years that I've got. Who do you want to be 20 years from now? And asking these questions of, who do I want to be at the end of my life? Then we reverse engineer. Then we look from that place and look back and say, okay, that means that I've got to have these things change in my life. Going back to the chat, the meaning of life is to give it meaning. Ooh, Oliver, I love that. The meaning of life is to give it meaning. I think you just really landed on something so profoundly beautiful. We really do get to assign meaning to life. Like, I do think that there's kind of existential meaning outside of what we think, because what happens if someone's like, life sucks and life is meaningless? Is that kind of what DJ said earlier, the objective truth versus subjective truth? But y'all, our subjective experience and our subjective truth has so much power in the way that we live our lives. So Oliver, to your point, the meaning we give life is the meaning of it in so many ways. That's true. That's what life is going to pan out for me. So what are the words I'm speaking over my life and the people around me? What are my thoughts? Because so much of it starts in the thoughts. And so it really almost like ups the ante of our responsibility and our ability to show up and make real change in our lives, like meaningful, real change that changes down generationally. Because if we're willing to change, that means that our kids probably will be impacted because of who we are. Because we're willing to change, they will too. DJ says, you cannot kill the person you once were, because it's all encompassing of who we are. We cannot be who we see ourselves in the future without who we were before. yeah, the goal isn't to kill or annihilate who we once were. So much of it is that actually, thank God, like I actually, who did this study? I can't remember who it was, but it was a university did the study, and they found that they were asking people, hey, if you could have somebody else's life, would you take it? And at first blush, everyone said, I would totally switch lives with somebody else. You have no idea how hard my life is. It's awful. Like I would 100% switch. And they said, okay, who would you switch it with? And it was like 80% of people said that they would switch. And then towards the end, it was like, actually, no, I can't think of a single person I would switch my life with. And I think maybe it was like 10, 15, maybe 20%. And again, I'm not giving 100% accurate data here. It's a raw estimate to show the fact that there's so much when we're just thinking high level of like how pitiful our lives are. But then when we think about switching it with someone, it's like, no, I actually really like my life, and I love what I've experienced, and I like who I am today. Isn't that such a beautiful thing to actually like who you are today? So DJ, to your point, the goal isn't to kill the person, but if you're willing to write your eulogy, I think you will be so surprised at what comes out. And the goal is to get to the point where your subconscious is flowing as you write on paper, and you're like, oh, I didn't even anticipate that would be something I wanted at the end of my life. Scott, I've been clean from active addiction for 4 years now by the grace of God, and I'm blessed to work in recovery, and my journey wasn't easy. Becoming willing to change and surrender was key. Wow. Thank you for sharing that, and congratulations. Scott, I can only imagine how many people in your life and in your world have just been so positively impacted because of that. Wayne, do you believe your words create your reality? Brian says life is how you make it. Y'all, I've seen that to be so true. I think what we say has so much power. And actually, if you read the biblical text, it says basically your words have power to bring life or death. And I've seen that to be so incredibly true. And so moving to kind of that next question of like, how do you get to know yourself? We talked about values, really looking in the mirror and saying, okay, what are kind of those guardrails, those core tenets? I think of it as like operating like a horse with blinders on. Like our values serve as blinders to keep us focused. And then this question of our eulogy so often is like, okay, that's where I'm headed. That's my target. That's my ideal. That's who I want to be and how I want to end up. And then the pathway to get there. That's the next stage of like, okay, well, how do I need to live in order to get there? But to understand who we are here in this moment, it's asking our values. It's also understanding what's on my heart for the future. What do I dream about? What do I love? What gets me excited? And then in terms of DJ, what you were saying in terms of the past, this question has been really, really formative for me. Going and looking in the past and kind of digging back into some of the history, looking at the archives, so to say, what moments were most formative and gave me a set of worldviews. So being able to go back to moments in the past and understand how those moments really framed the way that I look at life, God, other people, myself. Now that I know that moment formed me to that extent, then I get to decide, do I want to maintain that point of view, that perspective, that program, that worldview, or do I actually want to change that? Because you know what? That worldview is not going to get me to where I say I want to be at the end of my life in my eulogy. So now we say, okay, what needs to be implemented in my life to get to where I want to go, but also what needs to be left behind and kissing it goodbye. Like that's not going to come with me. That's done. That's old data that has old history associated with it for the past in terms of maybe a real experience that I really needed that narrative and that worldview, but now it's no longer here. I'm just looking here in the chat. Ultimately, while the idea of a switch is common fantasy for experiencing something new, most people, upon reflection, find value in their own unique lives. Yes, it's so true. Like, what a blessing to really realize, man, we're so blessed and we've got we're actually all pretty cool. I love that. Y'all, I need to jump off early tonight. I'm sorry I can't stay on much longer. I have to finish a proposal for a roofing company. So I need to jump off. I'm doing a branding and marketing proposal for them, and I need to send it over tonight. So I'm sorry I can't stay on longer. For those of you, 2 housekeeping items. For those of you who are not, we are going to be moving over to Christene Marie. So if you're not following me over there, go ahead and subscribe over there if you'd like to stay in touch. I'm dropping that here in the link. And then the second, we're going to be launching the Knowing Community at the end of the month, because one of the things that I really love is for you guys to be able to continue these conversations when, even like we're having amazing conversations in the chat, and I hate that when I hop off it stops. So I don't want that to be the case. And also, I'd really love to be able to, Oliver says, "Where's your money button?" I don't know what that means. But we are going to have a little mini subscription. Actually, I've been encouraged by some folks here on the chat to have just like, it's like $1.99 or something like that, so that the only people who can comment are people who are part of the community, because we do get some weird folks in the chat. And so I just like want to keep it safe. We have such amazing conversations. Lion, good to see you. Ninja, it's just like we want to protect this. So I really appreciate each one of you, and I really carry you guys on my heart, and I'm just so grateful that you're here, and I'm grateful to grow with you. So thank you for being willing to do the work. Y'all, I really have found that there's so much meaning and so much value in the world, and sometimes it's being surrounded by people like each one of you in the chat, where we get to really grow together, and it gives hope. The world's a little bit brighter. So with that, thank you all so much for joining me. I will see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, for a